Suppose just one cult member over at Direct Action Everywhere had been willing to speak with me, man to man, person to person, face to face. Suppose in the last 10 years, just one of them had been willing to have a conversation with me. Now, one of the most powerful and important indications that this really is a kind of cult is that none of them ever would sit down and talk to me. Suppose just one of them presented the case that I've heard again and again and again from their members that begins with the supposition that the change we're pursuing in the world is in imitation of Mohandas Gandhi, the so-called Mahatma Gandhi from the history of India. I'm in a position to raise the question, how did this assumption get baked into your philosophy? You claim you have worked out a proven path to changing the world based on unassailable facts established by social science research. And yet, the choice of Gandhi as your model, as your exemplar, that's not really scientific, is it? How would you respond to a competing movement, perhaps a competing and equally cult-like political movement that instead, with just as little explanation, built its whole philosophy and praxis on the life of Benjamin Franklin? Now, already 4 or 5 interesting questions open up here. Are we talking about the actual life of Benjamin Franklin? Are we talking about the real political facts about what worked and what didn't work, what happened, what didn't happen, what was kind of an unforeseen, improvised outcome of decisions made by Benjamin Franklin, and what he hoped or planned would happen? Like, there's a lot of kind of fog of war, literally and figuratively, in the life of Benjamin Franklin. But okay. So if we take Benjamin Franklin as our model, right away there's a question of, are we talking about propaganda fiction about the life of Benjamin Franklin? Or if it's not the Benjamin Franklin that young school children learn about at a very early and impressionable age, if it's not the Benjamin Franklin of fable, but it's the real Benjamin Franklin, the genocidal pro-slavery Benjamin Franklin, the cheating on his wife and having kids out of wedlock and lying about it and covering up Benjamin Franklin. If it's the reality of the real life Benjamin Franklin lived, the real methods he used, the philosophy he preached, and then how he actually put into practice, how do we even know that? How have we all, as a movement, agreed upon what Benjamin Franklin is? What version of Benjamin Franklin is we're imitating? Nobody in the vegan movement, aside from this YouTube channel, aside from myself, aside from à-bas-le-ciel, aside from my husband, nobody has ever once even questioned, who is this Mohandas Gandhi? Is this method from Mohandas Gandhi you're imitating? And is it just a propaganda fiction? Or if not, what is the fact? What is the reality you're working from? And on what basis did you establish that it was in any way relevant to, salient to, your political struggle in Seattle, in the United States of America, in Berkeley, California, in the 21st century? In what way exactly is Mohandas Gandhi advocating for the rights of Indian immigrants in South Africa comparable to your situation in California, United States, 21st century? And then beyond that, what is there about this claim that could possibly be scientific? Now, I don't want to expand these examples and parallelisms endlessly, but of course, it doesn't have to be Benjamin Franklin. What if you know a group of young people, and here we are, 2023, none of these people are young anymore. All the people who were 25 in the YouTube videos of Direct Action Everywhere from 10 years ago are now 35. And the people who were 35 are now 45. Like, just literally, all these people have grown old. Repeating a method, putting into practice a political philosophy that does not work again and again and again. And I was here on YouTube more than 8 years ago saying, guys, here exactly is the problem. Here's why it won't work. And I'm here sitting around saying, well, who's on my side today? Like, I haven't had to get out and demonstrate this to you. It has demonstrated itself. It's now proven. Let's just say 10 years ago, it wasn't Benjamin Franklin and it wasn't Mahatma Gandhi. What if it was Vladimir Ilyich Lenin? Wouldn't you raise some of these questions? How did your whole political movement come to be based on the career, the biography of Lenin? And then right away we have that question. So what, is this the propaganda fable about Lenin? Or is it the horrible reality of Lenin? I'll be real with you. I could extempore talk about the horrifying reality of who Mohandas Gandhi was off the top of my head. I know a lot more about this than Wayne Seung ever did. I mean, the position of Wayne Seung, the position of all of his followers in Direct Action Everywhere, is of a group of people who, idolized Mahatma Gandhi without even reading a Wikipedia article about them, without even that level of erudition or knowledge of what it was they were signing up for. And the tragic truth is there are millions of people around the world today who, in the same way, follow the example of Lenin, follow the example of Stalin, follow the example of Mao Zedong, without really knowing anything about that person's life, let alone their political philosophy, what happens when it's put into practice, and what applicability or salience it would have to the world today. For example, to trying to advance the status of veganism, etc., or even ecology more broadly in California in the 21st century. It's like, yeah, whatever you may think about the life of Lenin, in case you hadn't guessed, I'm an anti-communist. It's not easy to see how, Lenin's political position in relation to Germany in World War I, like, how do you, draw out the implications for this, the implications of this historical example for what it is you want to do now in Berkeley, California. All right. Now, Mohandas Gandhi was insane. His views on religion and politics were insane. His book, Nonviolence and Peace and War, is laughable. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. And that's probably why you haven't read it. You didn't grow up with people around you, telling you it. Now, there are some other examples here. Again, I don't want to keep this one thought experiment going on for the whole video. But if one person from Direct Action Everywhere had sat down and spoken with me 10 years ago, I could have said, how is it that the life and career of Mohandas Gandhi got baked into your assumptions in this way, got set in stone as this primary assumption, and then on top of it, you build yet more implausible assumptions and extrapolations. Instead of the life of Benjamin Franklin, instead of the life of Julius Caesar, instead of the political philosophy of Aristotle, instead of what are acknowledged as the greatest and most important theoreticians in the history of democracy, in the history of politics, broadly defined. All right? Now look, I'm a pretty harsh critic of Ben Franklin in various ways. But you know what? He is remembered as a genius. He is remembered as ahead of his time under many different headings, as a great scientist, as a great thinker. He is remembered, and his collected sayings, his aphorisms, are still read and admired as philosophy. His autobiography is still read and admired. Not Gandhi, not Lenin. There's a reason why these particular figures are actually hated and despised and sneered at and laughed at. That they do not have a reputation in political science, political philosophy today, the way Aristotle does. Or again, I'm the world's harshest critic of Plato. I really am. If you know me personally, I can sit and criticize and cross-examine Plato all day. But there's no reason why this supposedly scientific approach to the pursuit of political change ever was based on the particular historical, literary, political figures that were chosen. No. None of these people have a parent who can sit down with them and have that conversation. So again, if you go back and look at the YouTube videos from 10 years ago, now some of those people, of course, have left Direct Action Everywhere, right? But the ones who are still in it are all 10 years older. Cassie King was barely legal when she signed up for Direct Action Everywhere, but she's plenty grown now. Years have gone by at a rate of 1 year per year, in case you hadn't noticed. All right. What would you do if Cassie King were your daughter? Okay. Cassie King has simply through imitation, simply through admiration, simply through cult-like devotion to Wayne Xiong, she repeats the same horseshit that's laughable when it comes out of his mouth, right? This has become an unquestionable religious credo for his followers, as I say, including the significance of Mohandas Gandhi. None of them read the Wikipedia article. None of them think twice about it. Okay. If you were Cassie King's father, you sit down at the dining room table, sit down on the kitchen table and say to her, explain to me how it is you're so certain that naked women pouring blood on themselves is going to bring about this social, cultural, and political change. And guys, I don't want to parody their argument here. Most of you know enough that you can, in your own mind, you can kind of improvise what the answer would be. And it probably would include a mention of Mahatma Gandhi along the way. Like, oh, well, you have to understand nonviolent direct existence as practiced by Mahatma Gandhi, blah, 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 blah. They're kind of different twists and turns. And nobody is willing to recognize, on the one hand, just how wildly implausible this is. And on the other hand, that it has nothing to do with Gandhi. This is not what Gandhi did in the political history of India. It's just ridiculous. That's not what ever was effective in getting India's independence from the United Kingdom, from the British Empire. It's wildly irrelevant, right? But in their minds, this has ossified into a kind of religious belief that nobody can question. And again, that's why not a single one of them has ever spoken to me face to face, on camera or off camera, right? I mean, just asking this still to this day. Come on, guys, why isn't this a conversation we can have? Because you may not recognize it, but in the last 10 years, I have been trying to help you. I am the only person who has been trying to help. I don't know a single other YouTube channel. If any of you know, you can write into me, whatever. Frankly, if there was even one other YouTube channel that took on Direct Action Everywhere, Wayne Xiong, the cult of Wayne Xiong, and that in this same way took on Extinction Rebellion, which in many ways recycled the same pitch, the same business plan from Wayne Xiong's Direct Action Everywhere. I am the only one who's been doing it. And I've been saying from day one, part of my concern is this is going to ruin your life. Yes, a small number of them have gone to prison. Wayne Xiong is literally in jail right now. He is in a prison cell today. I believe his sentencing is coming up the day after tomorrow. We'll find out how long of a jail. Yeah, that's one obvious way in which this can ruin your life. To my knowledge, Zoe Rosenberg started being involved in this when she was 13 years old. If it's 14, I apologize. But to my knowledge, she has been involved in this from the age of 13. Anyone just looking at that kid can say, wow, veganism ruined your life. Direct Action Everywhere ruined your life. There's a better person you could be today if you didn't spend the last 10 years as a crazy cult member of this group. Sorry, Cassie King. I could repeat the same thing. There's a better person Cassie King could be today if she didn't become a victim of Wayne Xiong, if she didn't become a victim of Direct Action Everywhere. And of course, she is the last person to admit that she's a victim because today she's the leader of direct action everywhere. She sits on the executive board. Wayne Seong is gone. She's taken over the leadership. I'm certain Zoe Rosenberg also would not admit that this is, while you're in the cult, you don't think the cult is ruining your life. Well, guess what? Rachel Ziegler now looks back at the last 8 years and she does regret it. Rachel Ziegler looks back at the last 8 years and she says she was a member of a cult. She was brainwashed and she totally regrets what she did with the last 8 years of her life. You don't get those 8 years back. Okay. There's a further danger, which I see influencing everybody in the vegan movement beyond mere direct members in members of any organization. People who are not a member of DXE, people who are not a member of any organization. I was talking to someone who's been in the game since 2005, and he was agreeing with me on about 9 points out of 10. He's also skeptical about Wayne Seong's direct action everywhere. But toward the end of the conversation, he said, well, what else can you do? What else can you expect people to do? Goes back on this. Like, obviously, people have to run into restaurants holding up a picture of a chicken or a picture of a bunny and saying, this is Sophia, my adopted daughter. She is someone, not something. It's not for, like, these incredibly stupid forms of protest. Well, yeah, of course, you have to run onto the grass field at a baseball game or a football game. What else are you going to do? What else do you expect them to do? I don't want to put words in his mouth, but in effect, what he was saying, not word for word, was, well, there is no path forward other than so-called nonviolent direct action, so-called disruption, the idiotic techniques used by DXE, by Extinction Rebellion, by most of the other groups today, even by PETA, if we're being real. PETA is kind of, a toned down version of this, well, there's nothing else they can do. So even if he's willing to agree with me that, yeah, women getting naked and pouring blood on themselves is fundamentally stupid and counterproductive and has negative outcomes for everyone, even if you don't go to jail. It's just stupid. It's just not, in the last 10 years, it didn't accomplish anything positive for the vegan movement, and it did accomplish anything. Nevertheless, his perspective is, well, what else can you do? We just have to keep on doing this. All right? Now, again, these people haven't read Aristotle. These people haven't read Thucydides. They haven't read Herodotus. They haven't read Plato. All right? I don't think they know Benjamin Franklin either. If you live within an echo chamber, if you live within a cult group of people, all of whom have agreed not to question Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, both not to question his goodness or greatness, his accomplishments, and not to question how it's relevant to, how it's salient to, how it justifies what we are doing in our lives today, right? In that context, think about the meaning and significance of the same phrase. Well, what are you going to do? What else can you do? There's nothing else you can do. Those people are living within a set of assumptions, right? Built up, in some ways, built up over many generations, but certainly within their own lifetime, built up over many years of repeating the same catchphrases and hearing them back from the other cult members. They have one model for social change. In that case, one model for revolution, right? Built on a Leninist, Marxist-Leninism, as they say. And nobody challenges it. Nobody overturns it. Nobody satirizes it. And nobody ever sits down at a table and says, okay, talk me through how this is supposed to work. The same way I just suggested, the father of Cassie King sitting down and saying, okay, talk me through how women getting naked and pouring blood on them is supposed to change. Why don't you talk me through how this is something Cassie King actually did, you lying down in a pile of cow manure and people taking photographs of it. She wasn't actually naked. She was wearing a flesh-toned bikini, so she looked naked. How exactly is that supposed to change the world? I mean, there are people now within the Gaza Strip who have been raised in a Hamas echo chamber. There's one political methodology, including martyrdom. They see paintings of the martyrs. So if you sit down with a person and you have a similar conversation, look, this doesn't work. It's terrible. It's bad in its outcomes. You're not accomplishing anything positive. Where even if they agree with you or agree with you on 9 points out of 10, they will at the end of the conversation say, well, but what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do except keep repeating this doomed and debunked, it's not just ineffective, but actually counterproductive methodology that, among other things, ruins people's lives. Now, look, in a perfect world, the parents could sit down with their own children at any age. I don't care if your child is 35. Your child is 35 and the parent is 65. Great. Sit down with your kids and talk through it with them. Nobody has parents like that. The number of intellectuals in the world is too few. The number of intellectuals with a high level of conversancy in real democracy, really understanding democracy, really understanding political history and political philosophy, and able to apply it, able to challenge those assumptions. It's just too few in this world. The odds are you don't have a father and you don't have a grandfather like Eisel Mazard, who can sit down with you and deprogram you. And that is really what we're talking about here. And, the sad fact is, we're not just talking about deprogramming a couple of cult followers in DXE. Over the last 10 years, the influence of DXE and frankly, just imitative organizations, other organizations that are very similar to it, including Extinction Rebellion, it's on such a grand scale that now we are talking about deprogramming the whole vegan movement. Corruption and conformity come about through many means. How many people are there who just accepted an airplane ticket and a hotel room paid for by Direct Action Everywhere, and for that reason are still to this day bending over backwards and making excuses for DXE and for Wayne Xiong? Okay? How many people are just victims of suasion on social media where they are aware if they say anything bad about Wayne Xiong, if they say anything bad about so-called open rescue, if they say any of the things I say on my YouTube channel again and again, the extent to which the mob will turn against them, the way it's been against me for all these years. All of the people who have participated in these methods over the last 10 years, I could say the last 20 years, on some level, they know it doesn't work. And again, I'm going to be real with you. People who have been members of a communist cell, of a communist cult, they know it doesn't work. They know the extent to which they're laughed at and sneered at for their efforts. They know the extent to which they're discrediting themselves by being members of these organizations and engaging in these tactics. How many times do you walk into a Chipotle, hold up a sign saying it's not meat, it's violence? It's not food, it's violence is the actual slogan, and act out exactly the same script verbatim. This animal is not something, it's not someone. And you see the reactions. Well, how many times do you do that before you admit to yourself it's not working? Once, twice, 10 times, 100 times? There are people who have done that 100 times. The newest tactic, and this is another very fundamental thing, they keep changing tactics without admitting that the earlier tactics don't work, without reflecting on what's fundamentally wrong with their political philosophy, right? The latest tactic is having teenagers go into grocery stores and take the lids off cow milk and pour it out on the ground. I've put up film clips of this. Okay, and now you can imagine how the staff react to this. Like, they can charge you with shoplifting in a sense. They can charge you with various crimes. You are, disrupting the store, all right? There's some cost to mop it up, but at a minimum, you're liable for the cost of the milk you've ruined. They might call the cops on you. They might have security kick you out of the store. But you see what the effects are on the other shoppers in the store. Whatever the fantasy was, whatever the dream was, that you would awaken the other people in the store and they would convert to veganism or be on your side or support you. This is similar to the communist dream that the workers at the factory are all going to support them if they just go and start reading out quotations from the Communist Manifesto. And guess what? Like, American automotive factory workers, they're not poor, they're not oppressed, they're not on your side. They're right wing. One of the things, go to Detroit, Michigan, communists, and try reading out Karl Marx to the guys who work at the General Motors plant today in 2023. I think all those guys vote for Donald Trump. Certainly, it may not be right wing, but they're conservative, they're right of center. They have absolutely no time and sympathy for even socialism, let alone communism. And they certainly don't think you are there to liberate them from their chains. they'll tell you they're goddamn lucky to have that job at the General Motors plant. And if anything, they're a somewhat privileged caste in the 21st century working that job. So anyway, just the irrelevance, and the way in which you're met with scorn and derision. The people who've actually done these protests again and again and again, they know that and they feel that. And there's one reason why the dropout rate is so high. They go and they're humiliated again and again and again. But their personal humiliation and the discarding of particular tactics, which again is never explained, never reflected on. The problem is it doesn't trace back to a re-examination of those fundamental assumptions baked into the philosophy. A philosophy that is propounded in a cult-like manner by Wayne Xiong, that is accepted and repeated verbatim, cult-like, by his followers, and that has at this point really infiltrated and we're going to say invalidated the whole vegan movement. Now, circa 7 years ago, we went through a period where a whole bunch of catchphrases from Freely the Banana Girl and Durian Rider had similarly infiltrated the movement, and it didn't last that long. I mean, I'm glad to say. Now, among other things, their philosophy, defied the laws of physics, defied the laws of chemistry. Thousands and thousands of vegans repeated this mantra that you could eat 3,000 calories a day while losing weight. You could eat 5,000 calories a day while losing weight. You could have unlimited calories as long as it was on a vegan diet. What a reassuring fiction. I mean, these were mostly notions about veganism that revolved around your personal beauty, athleticism, and weight loss, right? But nevertheless, there was an ethical component to Freely's doctrine. There was an ecological component to Freely's doctrine. One of her hit videos was originally titled, "If You Are Not Vegan, You Do Not Deserve to Live." And it was so controversial, she changed the title. I believe the final title was just, "What Do You Think?" ? But there was it was gotten to mainstream newspapers and radio stations talking about this. Here was this vegan leader willing to come out and say, if you are not vegan, you do not deserve to live. And her argument there was ecological. Now, okay, there were other components. I've made videos talking about this. There were other components to what made this powerful message while it lasted. Extreme hostility against the medical establishment, extreme hostility against the university establishment, extreme hostility against your own parents. You shouldn't live to make your parents happy. You should live your own life. It was a whole philosophy for every part of your life. And I'm going to be real with you. As bad as that philosophy was, it's better than Mohandas Gandhi. It's better than Mahatma Gandhi. It is. Okay. Freely's philosophy isn't that crazy. It isn't that bad. If you want to know who the real Gandhi was, it's a terrible philosophy. It's a terrible philosophy to live by personally. It's a terrible philosophy, to put into practice politically. Okay. So, for a short time, those catchphrases became the dominant, unquestioned leitmotifs in the vegan movement. Right? Wayne Xiong is in jail. Okay. And again, I've made a blog post about this. When you look at the metrics, nobody gives a fuck. Shockingly few people care. Shockingly few people are interested. It's not big news. He, circa 5 years ago, he had videos going up with millions of viewers. I think his single biggest collab was with Vice News. There are several, if you put his name into YouTube, from years ago, there are several videos that reached a big audience. Doesn't mean anyone in that audience sympathized with them. Doesn't mean anyone in that audience became vegan because of him. Doesn't mean you built a coherent movement or ever had a coherent political philosophy. All right? Look, now is the time more than ever for you, yes, you in the audience, to sit down with the other vegan activists and on a face-to-face basis, man to man, woman to woman, whatever the gender combinations are, to sit down and have that talk that Cassie King's father should have had with her, that Zoe Rosenberg's mother should have had with her, where you really deal with and challenge and overturn the fundamental assumptions that the movement is based on. All right? When you don't challenge those assumptions, instead what you get are these meaningless shifts in tactics, to renew hope among the hopeless, right? Like, oh, well, it didn't work running into a Chipotle restaurant and holding up these pictures and screaming about the suffering of the animals. But now instead, it's a naked woman who runs into a grocery store and lies down on a bunch of meat and covers herself with blood. And you don't see video of how that ends. I assume security or the other, grocery store workers haul her out. Who is even the audience for this? The only people who see this are other vegans on YouTube. It's just fame whoring. It's just ridiculous. And frankly, this is no different than an advertising campaign a perfume company might do or something. This is not real politics. It's not real democracy. Oh, okay, well, that wasn't working. It wasn't working in any sense other than eliciting donations that go into the pocket of Wayne Seung as his sister. Okay, Wayne Seung's sister has the signing authority for a bank account with over $1 million per year in it. Okay, why is this a family business, Wayne? Okay, that's the sense in which it succeeds. Succeeds like any other kind of fundraising, like any other kind of fame whoring. It fails under every heading. Oh, okay, and then people start to get, disillusioned with nudity and pouring blood on themselves, which they also did at a Bernie Sanders rally, run on stage and interrupt Bernie Sanders, do at sports games, run on stage, run into the grass at a sports game. Oh, okay. So this time it's going to be milk. It's going to be going to the grocery store and pouring milk on the ground. In this sense, they keep improvising new variations on a theme, but never going back and re-examining the fundamental errors. As you say, whatever you want, they've been ossified, they've been baked into the movement, they've been built into, they're there fundamentally. And then further excuses and rationalizations stack on top of that. All right, let's go back to first principles. The original claim made by Wayne Seung was that the tactics used by PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the tactics used by PETA had failed. They wouldn't work. They never could work. And now here's why. All right. Today, compare the tactics used by PETA to the tactics used by Wayne Seung's organization, Direct Action Everywhere. They are the fucking same tactics. The same tactics, the same strategy. There is no difference. I'm asking you in the audience, you may only know 2 other vegans personally, you may know 5. Now is the time to sit down and deal with this. One-on-one, whoever it is who loves you, whoever it is who trusts you, sit down. I can't get the message to them. Nobody from DXC will talk to me. No other vegans who are indirectly influenced by DXC this way will talk to me. All right? It's a very simple question to ask. Say, hey, look, in the beginning, Wayne Seung said that what DXC did was going to be fundamentally different from PETA. What PETA did wasn't working. It never worked. It never would work. So here's why DXC was going to do something new and different. And the reality is now, look back over 10 years, it's not new. It's not different. Why am I yelling? Because these people are cult members. They are indoctrinated. And again, indirectly, even people who aren't influenced by the cult, they are so thoroughly influenced. They're so thoroughly brainwashed by this that even when they agree with you, they say, as I've already quoted this one guy saying to me, well, what else can you do? Yeah, within communism, well, what else can you do? This is the only thing you can do. This is the only thing that's possible. Has a meaning. Within Islam, okay? Think about people who are trying to change the world within a Muslim majority country today. It doesn't have to be something as extreme as Gaza or Libya. It can be boring old Indonesia. It doesn't get in the news that much. And they say, well, what else am I supposed to do? You could meet someone who's trying to make the world a better place in Indonesia, but they feel the only thing they can do is go around and ask for donations for a Muslim charity that helps to make the world better through typically Muslim means. They are a very charitable culture, by the way. And you say to them, yeah, but, circumcision, God doesn't exist, like honor killings, child marriage, women don't have education. Like, let's talk about all things that are wrong with Islam. And they may agree with you, 9 out of 10. They sit there and they're like, yeah, no, it's true. Really, in a lot of ways, this is a backward culture and it's a bad religion. But, I'm trying to make the world a place. What else are you going to do? What else can I do? They're working within this paradigm, a paradigm for a particular type of charity, a particular type of activism. And they may be able to point to things they've accomplished. They say, yeah, by working within this Muslim charity, there are homeless people and I provide them with food. There are poor children who wouldn't have access to education and I provide them with access to education. They actually have positive outcomes. Unlike DXE, unlike vegan activism, who pour milk on the floor and there are no positive outcomes. This compares badly to Muslim charity, Christian charity, Mormon charity. It's a scam within a scam. I'm asking you to sit down and talk these things through with the other vegans you know in your life. Because right now, Wayne's lies have been exposed by his own court case. Right? The false claims he made that are at the center of this movement, the false claims about the morality and legality and efficacy of so-called open rescue, the false claims about disruption as such, they have been exposed now, and he is sitting in jail as a consequence. And you've got to say to these people, where's your money at? The money you donated to this shit over the last 10 years, where do you think that went? And if you live your life like Wayne Xiong, what the fuck do you think is going to happen? And what the fuck do you think it's going to accomplish? We really need to sit down and reflect on this. Okay? And look, I say, I have been trying to help people, but I can't help them. I can't reach out to them. And none of them, I mean, again, whether the cameras are on or off, they won't come and do a podcast with me. They won't do a YouTube video with me, but they also will not talk to me off the record. Even the people who've been disillusioned, even the people who've quit, because they're stuck with this sort of sunk cost fallacy where they have to spend the rest of their lives justifying and glorifying what they lost so many years doing, and then in some cases what they lost so much money doing. You know, oh, such a good cause. Oh, Wayne was such a good guy. He was so well-intentioned. It's just too bad that. Oh, if anyone from the audience has anything intelligent to say and wants to ask a question, now is the time to ask, because I've lost my train of thought. It's a good time for me to pause and do Q&A.
It's an interesting idea to have a vegan organization that feeds poor people.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. No. So Melissa raises something. I haven't talked about that since season 1 on the channel. You remember I used to talk about having a vegan pancake stand, vegan soup kitchen, where you do more traditional charitable activities while promoting veganism. Yeah. Right. So, why hasn't that happened? Again, from my perspective, it's very much the topic of today's video. It is the dominance of this pro-disruption message. That disruption is the only way to receive. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, and what if instead you were, Melissa suggesting, what if instead vegan charities were providing food and clothing and shelter for the homeless, or providing education to poor people who couldn't get an education? What if they were actually doing traditional charitable works? Well, obviously that is better than naked women pouring blood on their boobs. That's kind of a weird. So someone says simply, quote, "I wish I knew even one other vegan in my personal life." Melissa says, yeah, me too. Yeah. So the cat down the road says, I agree, Eisel. These are stupid tactics. What makes it such an interesting puzzle is that the stupidity is there right up on the surface. There is no veneer. And yet, I mean, again, I could say I've been doing this for 8 years. I could say I've been doing this for 10 years or more, depending on how you want to calibrate it. Nobody is on my side. I appreciate you are. And okay, sorry. Again, I'm going to take a minute to answer questions. If you believe it is a scientific fact that 1, disruption works, and 2, nothing other than disruption works. That is what they claim, that the other tactics don't work. And look, again, let's be real. Everyone's already disillusioned with PETA. Everyone's disillusioned with the Humane Society of the United States, other groups we don't even mention here. Everyone's disillusioned with farm animal rights movement, farm animal sanctuary too, it's different. There are a lot of things to be disillusioned by. People are disillusioned with Greenpeace. In Canada, Greenpeace was to be England too. People are disillusioned with the Green Party, with Greenpeace. So people are sympathetic to that. Okay, so no other method works. And then they're told it's a scientific fact. It's proven as a matter of science that this one method works. That's kind of the thin edge of the wedge that gets into people. Now, again, the reason I want you to really sit down and deal with people face to face is that it's so hard to take the next steps in that conversation. Well, a communist may tell you that it's a scientific, like Marxist-Leninism is a scientific fact. They use the word science all the time. I was just recently reading about the history of Russia condemning Israel, and that was also called scientific anti-Zionism. The critique and condemnation of Israel by Russia was scientific, and they kept putting in the word scientific. Their scientific opposition to Israeli racism, as opposed to their support for Arab nationalism. Everything was stamped with science by communist dictatorships. Something as simple and deep as that. Look, the choice of Mahatma Gandhi, that choice cannot be scientific. There's nothing scientific about it. There is no scientific fact you can show me. There is no data. There is no evidence that says the method used by Mohandas Gandhi is what will be effective. Now, we can apply this sort of going backwards and going forwards. We have to clarify what Mahatma Gandhi means. Like, is this just a symbol? I was saying this before in contrast to Ben Franklin, in contrast to Julius Caesar. Okay, do you think Adolf Hitler could have been defeated by the methods proposed by Mahatma Gandhi? A lot of you guys might not think of that. That's not hypothetical. That was an actual situation. Mahatma Gandhi wrote to the Prime Minister of England. He wrote to different political leaders in England, telling them exactly what to do in response to Hitler. Do you want to know what his advice was? Surrender. Surrender and passively accept the German occupation of the whole of the United Kingdom, to allow Hitler to take over the British Isles and the whole British Empire. And to resist nonviolently using Gandhi's methods, which again we could say more about. Okay? So it's not hypothetical. They were alive at the same time. Hitler and Gandhi were alive at the same time. World War II happened within Gandhi's life. In case you didn't know, in case you never thought about this. Okay? So we don't have to theorize what would Gandhi do in response to Hitler. We know. Mohandas Gandhi's answer to the threat of Nazism, fascism in Europe, Hitler specifically, was to surrender. Right? Does that sound like a good strategy to you? Does that sound like a good tactic to you? Do you think that would have worked? Do you think that would have worked better compared to inventing the atom bomb and dropping it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? This is the brutal, terrible reality. So again, we can apply it backwards. Do you think Mohandas Gandhi's methods could have ended slavery in Haiti? Yeah, I said Haiti, motherfucker. You didn't think I was going to. Oh, well, if the black people in Haiti had just, peacefully resigned themselves to slavery, and what do you think? Really think this through. It doesn't make sense. Oh, well, if the people of Haiti had only engaged in symbolic acts of resistance, like standing naked and pouring blood on themselves, what are you thinking? It doesn't make sense. Moving backward in history. I've made many videos stating that it doesn't make sense when supplied present tense to democracy in Hong Kong, the Arab Spring. The examples these people choose themselves. People like Wayne himself chooses the example. People like the leaders of Extinction Rebellion. Doesn't make sense applied to Libya today. It doesn't make sense applied to the Gaza Strip today. But okay, now let's look in the future. How do you want to bring about democracy in communist China? How do you want to bring about atheism in Iran? If you actually believed in these methods, you would say to those people in those struggles, you would say to people in Myanmar facing down a military dictatorship, you say, oh, it's a scientific fact. The only way to win is what Direct Action Everywhere is doing. This is the only way to win. Oh, don't do what PETA is doing. Don't do this, don't do that. Here's the method, proven as a social science fact. Here's the way to progress. Here's the way to democracy, right? And none of these people do that. I mean, it's a phony faith they have in their cult because they never apply it to any other example. They do not think that the methods used by Direct Action Everywhere would even be effective in ending cigarette addiction, in abolishing nicotine. Nicotine is wildly unpopular in the United States compared to meat and dairy and eggs. 99% of people in America think eating meat is morally positive. They even think it's good for their health up to a point, right? I mean, whatever. Or maybe I shouldn't say 99%, 95% or something. It's the overwhelming majority. What percentage of Americans would say that about cigarettes? Almost zero. Okay, so the 99% of America supports you in wanting to abolish nicotine addiction and cigarettes. Why don't you use the same tactics Direct Action Everywhere has been using? Why don't you use these tactics? Why don't you act like Mahatma Gandhi and overcome cigarette addiction? How about fentanyl? How about cocaine? How about prostitution? How about abortion? Why is it that these tactics have never worked for the abortion movement? And why aren't you recommending them to these other movements? Why don't you go and talk to the people who are trying to deal with drug addicts and say, look, bro, the reason why it's so rampant in the United States of America, the reason why fentanyl and cocaine and methamphetamine have taken over is that you have one method that's scientifically proved to work, if you believe it. So again, getting people to be really honest with themselves about what it is they believe. That's what I'm inviting you guys to do. So I have a comment from Bogus Blade Gaming. Quote, I assume a gaming channel. Quote, trying to explain why you're vegan to lay people is difficult because you risk sounding ostentatious trying to describe your ethical philosophy. Curious about how you go explaining to people. Well, this is totally off topic for this video. I mean, what I'm dealing with in this video is how vegans should speak to other vegans and frankly try to deprogram them, try to get them out of this cult mentality and these false beliefs. You know, I really think you have to ask yourself whether or not you are respected or even you are feared by the people you're talking to about veganism, what your position is in relation to them. Talking to your own university professor, talking to your own father or something, talking to somebody who has power over you is very different from talking to someone who is powerless, in the face of you, But anyway, this is very strange to me because you say trying to explain your ethical philosophy. It's very. You have to give me a scenario in which someone is actually asking you about your ethical philosophy. No, I mean in real life, face to face, nobody ever does. Nobody has any interest in your ethical philosophy. So anyway, sorry that's a non-answer. I'm trying to remember the last time anyone who was non-vegan asked me about it, talking about veganism, and it's very rare. And frankly, I think DXE and Wayne Young are a big part of that. If people know that you're vegan, they just apply their preconceived notions about what that means and why to you, and that's it. I can't remember the last time anyone asked me why I was vegan. It's been many years, but it's been never. Just being real with you. Because they don't want to know. Oh. Okay, so someone by the name of 23 Pants says, we have an animal rights info table with petitions we build up on Saturdays here, and I always bring vegan cake or cookies for the passersby to try. Sometimes we dress up silly, but not often. So in Wayne Young's original autobiography, that was one of the stages he went through. So he's changed his story about why he became vegan. But season 1, Wayne Young would say that for many years on a university campus, he handed out free cookies with the pamphlets. They were vegan cookies with a pamphlet telling you to be vegan. And it never worked. It never accomplished anything. Nobody converted to veganism. Nothing positive came of it. And that was the backstory to his, adopting these more radical methods. Pardon me. So Bogus Blade Gaming says, quote, that's my point. That's why it's hard to explain it, because they don't try to understand your philosophy. But they will ask you questions like, do you eat French fries? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a particular example of someone, you know, where I said to him directly to his face, you know, if leather really were superior to plastic, why do you think the U.S. military doesn't use leather boots anymore? Combat boots are not made of leather. You know, we are just challenging it in this sense. The U.S. military has an infinite budget in the trillions. Why do you think they don't use wool? They don't have wool jackets, wool clothing, leather. You really think there's an advantage here that justifies the cruelty and the ecological damage? You're sure about that? I can remember having conversations like that with people. And again, these are people who kind of regard me as brilliant anyway. And they get very spooked and very upset and very shaken up, because they are exactly people who've been living with the rationalization that it's necessary to use leather or necessary to use wool. And really, there's no benefit at all, or the benefit is so slight that it can't possibly justify these other cruelties and externalities. So, this is the sort of thing you get into. Again, in terms of really talking to non-vegans, I can't remember saying this to someone, but like the difference between vegan ice cream and non-vegan ice cream, like, how would this justify? There's a very slight difference in taste. Whether you think it tastes better or tastes worse, they're so close. Why, what are you going to build on this trivial difference? Something I've said many times is the commitment to be vegan is the commitment to buy this chocolate bar instead of that chocolate bar when you're at the grocery store. They're not normally labeled as vegan, but plenty of chocolate bars don't contain milk. So, this kind of thing. But, sorry, this is a shallow answer because it's a shallow question. The one time we did street activism in Vancouver, and I made a video about this at the time, someone who was a hardcore communist came up to me and said very confidently, and this is a very stupid person, this is someone who's a member of a communist organization, present tense, said very confidently that all these problems with factory farming were just because of capitalism. And that once the communists or the Marxists took over, we wouldn't have these problems. Supposedly we'd have happy meat. And now I know a lot about communism. And I was able to ask in a very serious way, how do you think slaughterhouses in the Soviet Union were different? How do you think slaughterhouses in Cuba are different right now? How do you think slaughterhouses in communist China are different right now? It's just ludicrous. You confront these things. So that's a particular conversation, a particular person. But yeah, in general, I'm sorry. I wrote this book, Veganism, Future, and Illusion. And it doesn't just answer this question. It answers why the question isn't worth asking. Because, what we're trying to do is not convince random people on the street at a very low level of interest, very low level of commitment to make a low level change in their lives. This is not between Coke and Pepsi. You can set up a stand on the street and invite people to take the Pepsi challenge and ask them whether Coke tastes better than Pepsi or Pepsi tastes better than Coke. That used to be okay, you can do that with vegan food. Sorry, the person, I'll just scroll up. What is it? 23 pants. Okay, you could do that with vegan cake or vegan cookies. You could say, hey, try the non-vegan cake, try the vegan cake, anything. It could be vegan hot dogs versus meat hot dogs. I'm sorry, for me, I don't think it requires further explanation as to why that's laughably irrelevant to the movement. That is a Coke versus Pepsi challenge. And what we're trying to accomplish in this movement is it's nothing like a Coke versus Pepsi consumer decision. The type of engagement you need from people and so on. So I've said this many times. It's much more like trying to recruit people into the army. You're looking for people at a very high level of commitment, high level of self-discipline. But, look, simply on the level of marketing, one of the companies that makes these vegan hot dogs, they could do that. So they could do the Coke versus Pepsi challenge. They could say, try the meat hot dog and try the vegan hot dog. Can you tell which one is which? Can you tell which one tastes better? if that's all it is, if it's just marketing for a consumer decision. But again, I think everyone who sees this video knows, even just having heard the last 50 minutes of this video knows, that's irrelevant to the struggle we're dealing with. So Alexander says, quote, when I was younger, I used to think that these methods work, and I used to read articles that enforced my own stupidity. I tried to explain your work to other vegans. Your method requires too much effort, basically. Okay, so thank you for the comment. But you know, which method really requires more effort? Sitting in jail is a lot of effort. Going to jail is a lot of effort. Committing crimes and all these terrible things these people do. So-called open rescue takes a lot of effort. You know, I'm sorry, but you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm not convinced that my method requires more effort, because there's so much effort demanded by the cult leaders and cult followers on the other side. Even just standing on the sidewalk holding a piece of cardboard chanting for so many hours, it's a lot of effort. So anyway, like again, I take it as a compliment. I know what you mean. I think it may be true that my method requires more intelligence, but more effort. It doesn't require more effort. Doesn't require more money either. So in terms of this comment about reading quote unquote articles that reinforced your own stupidity, I posted recently to my own blog an article from Wayne Xiong written just a few months ago, before he went to prison, but not that long before he went to prison. And you can go through that article. I mean, to me, it's just ludicrous how stupid the argument he's making is. And so I'll give you the link to my blog, but I'll also give you the link to the longer article by Wayne that I'm quoting from in that blog. They are both linked. And if you look for the word data in Wayne's original article, so this is on the topic of quote unquote article that reinforced your own stupidity. He says there's lots of data. So here we go. We'll get the exact. I think he says plenty of data. You know, quote, and there is plenty of data to back up these arguments. All right. There is absolutely zero data. There is zero data in this article by Wayne. There is zero data in the earlier article by Wayne that he links to a sentence after, claiming there's plenty of data. And I'm telling you this honestly, there never will be data to support this argument, you know, to support DXE's position. But that has been repeated enough times that it's become an article of faith. So again, I do think a very relevant example, Freely the Banana Girl and Durian Rider. They reported things that never were scientifically true and never could be scientifically true. They repeated them again and again and again. And even if it was only for a period of, say, 3 years, those became leitmotifs defining the vegan movement. I had my boss in China. More than one person was my boss, but you know, one of the guys who was my superior in China. When I told him he was vegan, every time he said, "Oh, so you eat no oil?" Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Sorry, when I told him I was vegan, his response was, "Oh, so you refuse to eat all oil?" He was like, "Oh, well, that's very hard for you because you can't, you all kinds of things like noodles or rice or vegetables or soup." He thought I couldn't eat anything that had oil added to it. So somehow that had penetrated to, rural Yunnan, China, that being vegan means you refuse to eat oil. Every single time I said, no, it means, like sometimes we speak in Chinese, sometimes English, sometimes a mix, because he spoke English too. We go back and forth between English and Chinese. Like I've been saying it both in Chinese and English. Like, no, being vegan means I don't eat meat. It means I don't kill animals. It means I don't ride horses. It means I don't wear leather. What do you mean? Oil? What's wrong with oil? Like soybean oil? I eat soybeans. Why would I refuse to eat soybean oil? Like what? Where'd you get from? But that had become pervasive to that extent for those few years. So in the same way, the so-called scientific conceptions or misconceptions that have been propounded by direct action everywhere, they are now the dominant misconceptions as the movement heads into a long winter. There's not even 10% as much interest in veganism now as there was in 2016. But they're dominating that 10%. Okay, just reading a few more of these comments here. Right. So someone else in the comments says, "quote, most people are pretty apathetic to veganism. People will ask me why. They'll ask why they're vegan, but then it's mostly a nicety. then I'll say something they try to cut back. They like Impossible burgers or something. So, look, someone asks you and you think they don't care, you can look them straight in the eye and say, you don't care, do you? You don't want to know. You can take it any direction you want to take it. But, anyway, you're not there for their entertainment. It's up to you. As I say, I've lived my life around intellectuals. I think every single one of my university professors was aware they should have been vegetarian or vegan. Most of them were just older people for whom it was vegetarian was the paradigm, not vegan. They're old men. But I think every single one of them was aware that being vegetarian was the right thing to do, and they should have done it years ago. And, talking about someone who's, say, a professor of Buddhism, professor of Asian studies, professor of Chinese, the type of people I talk to, they regarded it with all due seriousness that way. And, I'm just saying it wasn't, it wasn't a casual conversation for them. And it was not something they would ask me questions about because they already know. They know my answer is going to be good and their own answer is going to be terrible. Somewhat hilarious question. Quote, do you still respect Tobias Leonhardt's approach? When have I ever respected Tobias Leonhardt's approach? Every single video we've made talking about Tobias Leonhardt's approach has been an absolute condemnation of Tobias Leonhardt. We did a book review on him and so on. No, I utterly despise Tobias Leonhardt as an individual. I despise what his organization has done with millions of dollars. If anyone in veganism is my hated enemy, it's Tobias Leonhardt. So I don't know where you're getting that question from. Who is worse, Wayne Xiong or Tobias Leonhardt? There's a tough question. All right. Last things first. Okay. What can be accomplished by sitting down with the vegans in your life and challenging these misconceptions? All right. I've got to tell you, it's the most important thing for that person personally. It's the most important thing for you personally in your relationship with them. Like, it's going to affect your life directly if these are the people you already know, already part of your life. And it really is the most important thing for the future of the vegan movement. I was talking to two different people in the last week, two different vegans. And to both of them, I said, look, you have to realize there are so few of us. There are so few of us who care about the future of the movement. Just by talking to you, I am talking to a significant percentage of all vegans who have given a damn and made a difference in the last 10 years and will continue to give a damn and make a difference in the next 10 years. Each one of these conversations matters, and each one of them has real consequences. Now, of all the forms of delusion, I think pseudoscience is the most durable and the most dangerous. I'll give you a painful example. What is more dangerous? The view of circumcision, cutting off part of the penis, losing 60% of the nerve endings in your penis, this kind of thing. The idea that circumcision is a supernatural, superstitious cultural tradition. Or the idea that it's a medically valid, important form of care that should be administered by a doctor in a hospital and that has no negative side effects and has been scientifically proven to be only beneficial and not harmful. Which one is more dangerous? If you didn't know, it's not just Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that have this tradition of circumcision. There are tribal groups out in like Papua New Guinea. There are tribal groups in Africa that have, there were indigenous people in Australia who have their own traditions of circumcision, of basically with a bladed object, disabling and damaging the penis and cutting off the foreskin as being part of a horrible, harrowing ritual. Okay, but what is more dangerous? The idea of circumcision indigenous to Australia, or the idea of circumcision that's presented to people with the veneer of professionalism of modern medical science in hospitals by medical doctors throughout the United States of America, whereby it becomes a routinized, unchallenged, and unquestioned operation done to millions of people, including millions of people who don't believe in the superstition, who don't believe in the supernatural elements, and who aren't part of any of those cultural traditions. Which one is more dangerous? All right. What I was saying before we did the Q&A session, I understand why it was that Wayne felt he was taking a step forward. I understand why vegans felt they were taking a step forward when they were taking a step from the earlier traditions into science. They were able to say everyone knows what PETA does is not working, whereas what we are doing now is proven to be effective on the basis of science. But unfortunately, they were just taking a step from one delusion into another delusion that is really even more dangerous. Okay? And this is now 2023. The question I'm asking you is, because some of the last few vegans who care watch my channel, when is that delusion going to stop? Okay? It's got to stop with you. It's got to stop with us. It's got to stop with us holding hands and taking this change together, where we come out in public and start to be honest about what it is that we all know privately. Okay, these protests don't work. These methods don't work. The philosophy it's built on is a combination of pseudoscience and lies. Okay, there's a reason why we've made ourselves the laughingstock of the modern world. Why do you think even Extinction Rebellion wants nothing to do with veganism? They'd rather be their own laughingstock. I'm sorry. Why do you think the COP29 meetings that we're up to, COP28, COP29? Why do you think vegans have no seat at the table there? All right. I'm sorry, I could talk about this all day, but very briefly, this gets you to quickly calibrate how tiny and despised our movement is, I think. I used the example of Mahatma Gandhi many, many times during this video. Another one they like to name is Martin Luther King Jr. Okay. Visualize Martin Luther King Jr. doing a lecture tour across the United States of America and going to one Black college campus after another. Now, if you're not American, you may not know this. The United States of America has what are called historically Black colleges, historically Black universities. It's not quite exactly segregation. It's not quite exactly apartheid, but there are colleges where at that time, 100% of the students are Black, 100% of the professors are Black. Whether or not legally on paper, it's exactly the same thing. There's a little bit of wiggle room. It's not exactly the same thing as apartheid. Okay. Imagine Martin Luther King going from college campus to college campus, giving a series of lectures across the United States of America. 100% of the students on that campus agree with him. 100% of the professors support him and agree with him. And you're talking about political claims such as Black people should have the right to vote. 100% of people on that campus agree with that. Both students and professors, the whole institution. Black people and white people should be paid equal wages for the same work. Black people and white people should have political equality throughout society. There should be an end to whites-only restaurants, barbershops, coffee shops, whites-only seating on buses. That all these things should be open to Black people to use equal. Whites-only drinking water fountains, right? It's not the case that he was going from college campus to college campus and fewer than 1% of the students agree with him or support him. And that in the whole college campus, there was maybe just one professor with any sympathy for his position, or maybe none at all. All right. When Wayne Seong gets out of jail, I have no idea how many years from now that'll be, or how many months from now. We don't know. Now imagine Wayne Seong going on tour from college campus to college campus. Hell, you know what? You can even imagine me if I go on a lecture tour from college campus to college campus. Not even 1% of the students agree with me, sympathize with me, support me. And again, Wayne is proposing a different philosophy. Not even 1% support him. Okay? That's the position we're in. And again, maybe there isn't a single professor that supports me. Let's say I'm doing this in competition with Wayne. Let's say we're both doing a cross-country tour. Okay, Wayne is going from campus to campus, and I'm separately going from campus to campus, competing against them. Maybe there's one professor that sympathizes with me. Maybe there's one professor that sympathizes with me, but maybe none at all. It's not the case that I would be showing up at these places and the entire faculty says, we're behind you, we support you, this is a necessary political change that has to come. And Wayne has, sorry, not Wayne, but Direct Action Everywhere has $1 million a year burning through their pockets in the bank. Okay? How did it become a bedrock assumption, an unscientific assumption that Mahatma Gandhi is a model for you to emulate, a model for you to imitate, that it's a pattern you repeat? How did it become baked into the system that the life and career of Martin Luther King Jr., again, just repeat, is it the real life of Martin Luther King? Is it the real facts of what happened? Or is it a myth we've made up about him? How were equal rights for black people achieved? Do you think the assassination of JFK had nothing to do with it? Really? Like, I'm sorry, there's a bullshit myth. If you believe that women taking off their clothes and pouring blood on their naked bodies is how you got equal rights for black people, you're goddamn wrong. If you think it was DXE style activism that won the civil rights movement, you're wrong. But even if you do believe that, even if you do believe the myth, recognize that the example is irrelevant to the situation we're in. I cannot do what Martin Luther King Jr. did, and neither can Wayne, and neither can you, because we have to start from a detached analytical understanding of just how despised we are, just what a tiny minority we are within the society. And the greatest tragedy of all is that the lasting effect of Direct Action Everywhere for the next 10 years is that it has made us even more despised. We are more despicable in the eyes of the majority as a result of these nutcases running into a Chipotle and holding up a picture of a chicken and breaking down weeping about how much they love their adopted pet chicken named Snow. We have become a smaller minority. We have become a more despicable minority. And we've become accustomed to preaching and repeating what can only be called the stupidest philosophy in the history of political science.